You are listening to the Why I Love Disney podcast. In this episode, we discuss the new Disney Pixar movie, Onward, and a few other nuggets of Disney news. Are you ready? Let's go. The crowds did not deter us this weekend from going to see Onward on opening weekend.
It did not, but it was the first time in a while that I actually thought of the germs in the theater, which they say is one of the, grossest places that you can.
Did they say that?
Yeah.
Dude, don't tell me that. I didn't know that.
Actually, yeah, I think theater seats are one of the worst.
Oh.
Sorry. I may be wrong. I've always heard that growing up, that it's worse than...
I will say this, like...
A lot of food. I mean, think about people handling food and touching the seat. And
I like the new ones with the leather seats, because I feel like those can be wiped off. You know what I mean? And sanitized.
That's a good point.
Those cloth seats are, Greetings and welcome to another episode of the Why I Love Disney podcast. I'm Dustin.
I'm David.
And we are excited to be with you today. It's just past opening weekend for Onward. There's other Disney news. We watched a little bit on Disney Plus this week, so excited to get started here. David, how was your week?
Great. How was yours?
Great. Are you well?
I am.
Family well?
Doing well.
No sign, no coughing,
No, we are very healthy.
No signs of corona whatsoever.
No. I'm just praying for those who've been affected, but we are well.
Yeah, I guess let's start with that, because the one piece of Disney news I saw, which is good news, is Shanghai Disney is starting to reopen, at least in a limited fashion. That's big news, because that would suggest that in China, maybe the worst is behind,
right,
as far as the coronavirus goes.
Yes.
So I found that to be a little bit of positive, of good news.
Yes.
Yet where we live here in here stateside domestically, it seems like the kind of the tension and the alarm is at kind of its peak right now,
right.
At least so the market's tanking today. There's announcements of closure. South by Southwest has canceled their conference. There's a big tennis tournament that's canceled. There's other conventions we were just looking up that in Nashville and different places in Orlando that are canceling things. So the question becomes, will we see any more closures from Disney parks around the world, or here specifically in Orlando or Florida? What do you think?
Well, I don't know. I think that I try to be cautious in times like this, but not be fearful. So if I had a trip planned, I would take more hand sanitizer. I would wash my hands more, but I would not be at this point fearful to go to the parks. And I don't think the numbers are going down. They had, with Mickey's Runaway Railway opening, I think attendance has been very crowded, and it doesn't look like they've had any slowdown. So I did see that, in the Orlando area, like 4 or 5 major conferences had canceled, which was a huge loss, tourism loss for the city. But I think Disney had put several hand sanitizer stations around the park, and maybe they're keeping things a little bit more monitored. I saw that they were wiping the turnstile areas when you come through and do your magic band and your fingerprint. They were keeping things a little bit cleaner. So,
Disney's usually on top of things, and there's an opportunity here. I got an email from Southwest Airlines today, and they were taking the initiative to let their customers know that their health protocols on how they sanitize the plane normally, mm-hmm. and how they're doing even more now to just wipe. They actually went through this detail about how they clean their bathrooms, mm-hmm. and then they said it's like some medical grade chemicals that completely clean the thing out, and they're super proud of how they do that. It's an industry leader, and they say we're going to start doing that exact thing through the whole plane, every day. So they're talking about how clean they want to make it, and they talk about their industry leading, their industry-leading terms on cancellations and moving things around if you need to do that. So Southwest is out ahead of this, telling their customers, hey, we're taking every precaution we can to make this safe for you. And it sounds like Disney's doing the same thing, which is smart business.
Right. I think that's all anybody can do with a lot of unknowns with a disease that people don't really know a lot about. Is all you can do is take as best care of yourself and your customers as you can, and keep things as clean as possible. And that's that's really all you can do at this point. I mean, I know that in other parts of the world, they've had to do a lot more restriction of travel, and hopefully that won't happen here.
Well, and again, like you said, you're not frightened by this. Like, you know, you just take precautions.
I would say I would be cautious,
but you wouldn't change your life drastically.
No, but there are a lot of different personality types that definitely would be afraid.
I wouldn't either. Like, it's not going to. Matter of fact, I was telling you earlier, like, I start looking for travel deals. You know, like, this is the perfect time to go on a cruise because no one else wants to go.
Well, and that happens sometimes when there's bad weather.
Right.
A lot of people, when predicted bad weather is going to be in Florida,
hurricane season,
people leave the park, and then some people will say, "Hey, you know, it didn't come through, and we had the park all to ourselves."
All the Floridians know the thunders. We're there. You don't know what's going to happen in Florida. They tell you it's most unpredictable.
The weather changes a lot just during the day.
I'm not scared of the coronavirus. I'm not going to change my life drastically. We'll take precautions, like you said. And again, I don't want to. There's two sides of this. Like, I know what I would do with my family to take precautions. At the same time, you know, when you look at kind of the we'll call it the panic that seems to be filtering out among the media, and there's different, you know, things. But when things start closing is when I start to get more concerned that when entities start losing money by their own choice, closing things down, canceling things. The South by Southwest conference really weighed on me a little bit. I wasn't going myself, but that's the biggest tech and music conference in the world. It's over 400,000 people descending on the city of Austin, Texas. It's huge to the Austin, Texas economy. It's huge to the music industry and the tech industry. There's people that have their entire businesses that are built to launch this week, right? This week of this conference, and for them just to cancel that, that was the first moment I'm like, whoa, this may be a bigger deal than I thought.
Right.
And
the same. That's exactly what I thought when they canceled, when they closed down Shanghai and Tokyo and Hong Kong. You're going, they would not be doing this unless it was. They had to. I mean, they're not going to close the parks unless they have to. And so, you know, it's serious when they're closing the parks.
You do, but it's one thing when it's, you know, half a world or the other side of the world.
Oh, yeah.
But then when it starts happening right here, what do you think the chances are that there's some sort of Disney closure at a park in the United States? What would you what percent chance would you think?
I would not know. I mean, all I know is what I'm, you know, you read a lot of articles I've read will say, don't be surprised if you see it get canceled at some point if the virus continues to spread and to affect more people. Don't be surprised. But then other, you know, we're getting a lot of mixed news, and others will say it's nothing.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's like the flu, which, you know, doesn't seem to be
things
that.
to close. We were talking about this a little before we started, and it's in no one's interest for the economy to come to a screeching halt, for everybody to stop doing things and going to movies and restaurants.
I mean, if people overly panic,
exactly,
and the economy shuts down, then you've got people can't make a living. So yes, but if it's really affecting the vast majority of the population, then it's a different thing, because now health is more important than the money.
Right.
I mean,
it's a big responsibility for those in charge of Disney, because or any big corporation or any place where people gather, you know, and you have responsibility over that. There are several ways to think about this one. The public health probably is the first thing. Your bottom line, not just your bottom line. That sounds greedy. I'm talking about you have employees that have to feed their families. You know, to shut down a park, that affects a lot of people adversely.
Right.
And you weigh all these things out. It's, I imagine, an incredibly difficult decision. But then there's the added part is, you know, let's just play the scenario out that a Disney park shuts down for a little while. The message that would send to everyone is be scared.
Yes.
If it's big enough for this to come to a screeching halt for a moment. And nobody wants that either.
Right.
So I think there's these tension, these things weighing out. And man, we ought to, thoughts and prayers to everybody involved, because we want to see. We hope it's nothing. Everything you read says it affects elderly and people with respiratory problems more. And it's probably not something we should be terrified about. But at the same time, you got to be careful, and you got to watch this stuff real close. It'll be interesting to see over the next, because I don't think it's over. It seems to be every day getting a little like there's something else comes out. And I'm
hopeful with Shanghai opening that is good news, because that means in that area of the world they're getting in more control. So hopefully we'll see the same thing happen here.
I'm looking back at when did Shanghai close? How long has that been? Shanghai Disney closes February 1st, so it would have been before that. So it's been over a month.
That's what I was thinking.
Since it's been down. So if that was it closed and now it's opening back up, that's a good sign, I think. So we'll focus on the positive and hope, people stay safe and wash their hands and use hand sanitizer and are smart and this whole thing is contained and people aren't impacted too badly by it, but it will be interesting to watch. Speaking of, in a company like Disney, it affects in a lot of ways. You got the parks, that's the obvious thing, but then even like their movie business, people going to theaters and things, it could definitely have if people get frightened to go out in public, it could affect those things as well. On the other side, they got the streaming business now, Disney Plus, so people can stay home and watch things.
But they have a lot of theatrical releases coming up, so
maybe they go straight to streaming. It's a nice hedge to have that, and be successful too. Right. And it also kind of might show you the importance of streaming in the future. I never even considered something like this. What if there's some reason why people couldn't go out Well,
there's definitely enough media to consume at home, but it's not quite the same thing as
I completely
media
agree,
in the theater.
But they're hedged. It's not like if the movie business stopped for a month. It's interesting to see this impacts the bottom line. Every company that is reliant on the supply chain from China, that I'm looking at article after article of companies saying keeping their employees home, tell them to work from home if they possibly can. There's other companies though in industries that's not even possible. So if they were to limit and scale back things, that drastically affects not just companies' bottom lines, but everybody's ability to feed their families, and you could see downsizing coming from there. There's a lot of implications for this. So thoughts and prayers, and hope this is quickly resolved and we can move on in a positive way. So speaking of, the crowds did not deter us this weekend from going to see Onward on opening weekend.
It did not, but it was the first time in a while that I actually thought of the germs in the theater, which they say is one of the, grossest places that you can.
Did they say that?
Yeah.
Dude, don't tell me that. I didn't know that.
Actually, yeah, I think theater seats are one of the worst.
Oh.
Sorry. I may be wrong. I've always heard that growing up, that it's worse than...
I will say this, like...
A lot of food. I mean, think about people handling food and touching the seat. And
I like the new ones with the leather seats, because I feel like those can be wiped off. You know what I mean? And sanitized.
That's a good point.
Those cloth seats are, just... Oh, gosh. I could tell you this story about this in my home, where I live now, an old theater, who you go in, the floors were sticky and there's this smell and it was for a long time, the only movie theater in town. And finally they only took cash too. You couldn't pay it was so shady. It was so shady and it was so nasty. And, but it was the only thing if you want to see a movie, and they had first run movies. It wasn't like a dollar theater or a discount theater. This was the only thing in town for a while. And when you said that, I'm like, yeah, okay, that computes with that, but I don't like to think about it. Sort of like, just hold your breath and go. But we both went and saw Onward this week. We should say it had a great opening weekend. 68 million worldwide. I think 40 million domestically. There was some of the headlines were like it's the lowest Pixar opening for a weekend. I saw a few of those, but I think it doesn't take into account. It's also the first Pixar opening that was in March, or actually February technically. So all Pixar movies up until Onward have been released summer or holidays.
Right.
This is the first one that's kind of off cycle like that. So I think that plays into it a little bit too. But 68 million makes it the number one movie in America. And I think it's a reasonably good opening draw.
Right. I did see lots of different type reviews, and definitely people saying it disappointment by Pixar standards, compared to like the openings of Incredibles 2. But, different time of year, different things going on in the country. I mean, who knows what affects people and whether they go to the movies or not. But I didn't see it as drastic as some of the people said. I didn't think it was a disappointing opening weekend. It looked like it was the number one movie.
Yeah, totally. And so talking about the critics first, and the reviews, you read a lot of them. I didn't read as many of them.
Yeah, they were like, financially, the weekend was like Good Dinosaur, which was not their best, opening weekend, compared again to something like Incredibles 2, which was like over 100 million just in that first weekend. So
Well, I'm looking at. I pulled up Rotten Tomatoes. It got 86% from critics, 96% from an audience score. So it is.
What was the audience score?
96%.
Oh, wow.
So it's a very high audience score with 229 reviews at 86% certified fresh from the critics. You saw some that were more mixed. I was reading down, and even the positive ones, I think. There was one here I was reading from NPR that says even mid-level Pixar still casts a spell. So it's calling it mid-level. So I think it depends on your expectations going in. Everybody's going to be comparing it to the Toy Stories and the Cars and the all of the big Pixar names. And so in that context, I think there's a little bit of tempering going on, a little bit of kind of weighing it out against things and kind of giving the expectations. I know you had read a couple that were a little less.
I saw like one. Let's see here. Wall Street Journal said, insistently unspecial. Another said, by Pixar standards, this movie set in a magical world doesn't quite cast a spell. Another said, never manages to rise above average. So there was definitely some rough ones out there, but I saw some others that were good and said it was a very good movie, and I saw some fan reviews that said it was their favorite animated movie ever. So it sounds like you get just about, in most cases, you get some of everything.
Yeah, I'm looking through these reviews, and it is sort of, even the ones that are positive are saying it in the context of, okay, it's not like the best of Pixar, but it's really good, and I think that's kind of what you've indicated. That's kind of your take, right?
Right. Well, I mean, it's when you're known for excellence, everybody compares everything you do to the other thing you did.
Right.
I mean,
the bar is super high.
Yeah, the bar is super high, but every I don't think every story is the same type of story. Like we've talked about, every Marvel movie is not Endgame. There's certain climaxes and there's certain epics. Every story is not an epic.
Right.
Some people want an epic every time. And so if it's not, that blockbuster kind of movie, they're not, and by blockbuster, I mean big and huge. There's other great stories that aren't quite the same. So, but
part of the reason we were excited about this, it wasn't a sequel.
Yeah, I loved it. It was all new.
Hype to it. Yeah. It just is what it is.
Yeah.
So it sort of stood on its own when you went in there. So tell me, what did you think? What was your impressions?
I really enjoyed it. And I look forward to seeing it again. I typically like things better once I've seen it 2 or 3 times. When you can really absorb all that they're doing, because there's so much going on in one of these movies, from the story to the animation, and there's so much happening on the screen. It takes a while to take it all in, and sometimes 2 or 3 times in, I go, man, I love this even more than I realized.
Right.
I think with almost every Disney movie, the more I see it, the more I appreciate it, and I'll go, that's really incredible. It just, when you see it the first time, it's hard to catch everything. Sure. So I look forward to seeing it again. I thought some of the acting was very good. I thought Tom Holland especially did a great job. There were several times I just would realize, like, wow, that's really good. Like I'm really believing him. And so especially, I thought they all did great, but I especially thought he just was incredible. And I thought it was the visuals, the new world, all that was really fun. I like going someplace we've not been before. And so, yeah. I thought emotionally it had a strong impact. I don't have a brother.
Yeah.
And so, I imagine different people would react differently, like a lot of Pixar movies, depending on where you are in life, what season in life you're in. When I saw Finding Nemo the first time, it was good, but my kids were all very, very small. And then as they got older, I saw Nemo again, and he was like, oh, it's really about the father letting go. And I liked it better when at a different season of life than I liked it even the first time.
Sure.
So I think if you've been through the experiences that Ian and Barley have been through in your own life, it's going to impact you even more.
Absolutely. I think when you look at Pixar movies, like you just said, that there's different ones depending on where you're at that impact different people more or less. I loved it. I thought I went with my 4 kids, 4 boys.
Yeah, great movie to take for boys.
I was in a noisy theater. It wasn't the most pleasant theater experience I've ever had. But despite all that, you fight through, and it resonated with me in a couple of ways. First, I loved, like you said, the world, the new world. Pixar's great at that. From Monsters, Inc. to Cars to they're just immersing you into something you've never seen or experienced in a creative way. I thought they did that great in this. This kind of whole idea that these mystical creatures are now they're like humans, they're normal and they've lost their magic, and they're unicorns and centaurs, and just the world's full of all these magical creatures minus the magic, because it's gone away or something.
I think that's a great premise too.
Very creative. Then the whole dynamic between the brothers. The younger brother just turned 16. He's at that awkward stage of life where he's trying to fit in, and he's getting his driver's license, and it's his birthday, and he's got an older brother who's kind of a still living at home with mom, and he's playing, a Dungeons and Dragons kind of, or one of those like Magic card games or Yu-Gi-Oh or those sorts of things, and kind of nerdy, but still kind of this idea of arrested development, and hasn't really taken responsibility for his life yet. And he's got this really awesome kind of falling apart van he calls Guinevere, and has a big unicorn painted on the side, and kind of honestly reminds me of like that.
I think it was a Pegasus.
Was it a Pegasus?
I think it was a flying horse.
You're right. It was one of unicorns.
The unicorns are like the raccoons.
That's right.
They're like the wild.
Yeah.
The pests.
It was a Pegasus. And the funny thing, he reminded me of like a lot of the Jack Black character in School of Rock.
Okay.
Sort of like unhinged, doesn't want to take responsibility, rock and roll forever. Kind of the difference is this guy still lives with his mom, and so I found him really. I think Chris Pratt is his voice. Yeah. I thought that was great too, and so the dynamic between the two of them, and then something happens on his birthday, and there's like this quest. Their father has passed away, and that's kind of the context of the movie. And then on their 16th birthday, there's a mysterious gift that their late father had left them, that their mom gives them, and they cast the spell, and there's this thing about the father's going to appear for 24 hours if they get this spell right and do this, but it doesn't quite work, so they end up going on this quest, and there's a countdown, a timer. They got 24 hours to pull this off, and these 2 brothers are now on this adventure to do this. So I found all of that kind of reminiscent of the old kind of like the Goonies and the Indiana Jones and the sort of those classic kind of adventure movies where it kind of hints to that. And even some of the shots, even I found myself, I've seen this before. This is Indiana Jones. This is classic kind of Spielberg, And
the temple scene where they're the tiles and the floor and the booby traps, that was reminiscent a little bit of.
Even
to me, it was like a nod, not a copying. It was an obvious nod.
There were a lot of them though. Like I even forgot. So the where they're at the chasm. And the bridge is up.
He had to jump, he had to walk.
The same thing happened in the Last Crusade, Indiana Jones' The Last Crusade. There was a trust that it was going to be a bridge, and then sure enough, the invisible bridge is there, and really interesting kind of nods and kind of echoes of those things.
Right. And I think that when I read some of the critic reviews that were negative, they saw that as a negative, that they didn't see it as a nod. Some reviews I read seemed to be saying that was, copy. And so they scored it, less.
Interesting. Yeah, I felt more like it was nostalgic in kind of a new take on the thing. And then you get through these 2 brothers are, on this adventure together.
Right.
They run into all these kind of problems, and they're, going to the mountain to find a gem, and this gem is going to help them do the spell and all this stuff. And then in the end, there's the emotional kind of payoff. There's a few things that happen throughout as far as their relationship and their struggles, but the real like emotional part of the Pixar movie, which we get in just about every Pixar movie, happens at the end when it kind of flips the plot a little bit on you. And we don't want to give away any spoilers, but it was one that I both my wife and I teared up in. I didn't in Toy Story 4. I don't in every Pixar movie. So if I were rating it on levels of kind of emotionally connected to, this is up there. This is there's 4 or 5 probably that I could say that really really got me. And this was one of them, and I love this movie even probably more than I'm looking at the critics and I got 4 boys and see the brother dynamic. And
I saw some before the movie came out. Before I went and saw it, I saw things that said, "Make sure you've got tissues, like you're going to cry." And then I saw things that said, "Funniest movie Pixar's made." It was like, wait a minute, what was it going to be? And so I do think it's probably to some degree where you are in life, what season you're in, what's your experiences, how is this going to emotionally impact you, and that's the way most movies are.
Sure. So I loved it. But while we're here, what are the most emotional Pixar movies for you? What are those? So to me, it's the one. Whatever I teared up in, I'll put that on my list. Are there certain Pixar movies, if you're going to rank the Mount Rushmore of Pixar movies, that really got you?
Oh, okay. There's different kind of emotions, like ones that there's that emotion of making me cry. Yeah. Working me up so much that I cry and I can't hold back the tears. And there's also just that kind of emotion where you see something and you want to watch it over and over because it just makes you so emotionally charged. There's also, that's a different kind of emotion. But I think you're talking about the sentimental emotional.
When you say simple, what stirs you what are the most stirring?
I definitely can remember several times, like with my kids in the theater. I think the most frightened we ever were in the theater was, and holding our breath moment was in Toy Story 3 when we thought they were all going to fall into the incinerator. I remember having to reach out with 3 kids there and make sure I'm touching all 3 kids at the same time because everybody was in a little bit of panic. What's going to happen? That was very emotional. Definitely in Toy Story 3 when Andy gives Woody away, that was very emotional. I think Toy Story 4 has lots of the same kind of emotion. There's anytime there's a goodbye, there's a farewell that between characters that you like, there's going to be strong emotion. I think, of course, Inside Out. Yeah. That's on my list. One of the very top emotional ones. Again, I had kids right in that stage of life, the same as Riley, young girls. So it was like watching for me, like, oh, this is what my daughter's experiencing inside right now. So that was very, very emotional. Of course, Up's very emotional. Yeah. I mean, within the first few minutes, you deal with the whole struggle of love and loss.
I think Up's great, but it was not nearly as emotional for me as Onward was.
Right.
And again, I think that's how everybody brings to it a little different, a little perspective. For me, it's Coco, Inside Out, Onward. I think that's it. They're all great. Like, right. I love Monsters, Inc. I love Cars. There are emotional parts of all of them, but the ones that got me, like I'm tearing up, like, oh man, really weighed on me. You get it's Onward's on the list for me, and Coco as well. And
now what is it that's very emotional about Coco to you?
I that culture, the way it kind of framed his connection to his ancestors, and just this idea that people are forgotten. And I'm a very, I think personally for me, I've at that point when I'd seen that movie, I'd never lost a grandparent.
Okay.
And so, I don't even really know why. Actually, that was 2017. I take that back. That was the summer I had lost my first grandparent.
Right. That's probably. I mean, it was when you saw Up. You had not.
Yeah, Up. I had not lost a grandparent.
Right. Yeah.
And so it was. So that was 2009, 2017. Honestly, that was the summer my grandfather passed away.
Right.
And I think the context of all of that happening was you're connected to your ancestors. It was just so colorful and beautiful, and the music and all of those things, and just that life is temporary, and
but being forgotten, what an emotion.
Yeah.
And I think we've talked about this before, but I I think one of the themes that seems to run through a lot of Pixar movies is just dealing with loss.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the loss of a loved one and pushing through that, or it's the loss of a dream or a loss of your childhood, imaginings like Riley and Inside Out, the way you think it is as a kid, and suddenly you get hit by the real world. A lot of these stories are dreamers who are hit with reality, and dealing with loss. So
absolutely, and how we,
Nemo dealing with not just the loss of a mom at the beginning, but not really loss. It's like letting go.
Right.
It's that process of letting go of things more than the actual loss. It's letting go of people, letting go of situations, letting go of and moving on.
Yeah,
I mean, seems to be,
and all of them are a little bit of that. Monsters Inc. Cars has the whole your dreams and your selfish ambitions and some of that stuff.
But always even the fact this movie is called Onward.
Yeah,
it's like moving onward. I mean, it's like going on into the next next season.
Yeah, I felt it was incredibly powerful, and I can't wait to watch it again too. And also the if you've at my house, there's plenty of those little Yu-Gi-Oh cards and Pokemon cards, and that plays a big part.
Yeah, you should. I think that's one thing that your family really connected with, because it really culturally.
Yeah.
I mean, your kids have been involved in that. There were probably a lot of people that are going to see this movie that are going to be like, I don't even know what they're talking about.
Right.
In that, it's just like they'll get that there's a game going on, but they don't have any personal connection with that game. It might not be the same for everybody.
Sure. I also think there's an element of of growing up and taking responsibility that in this one, I think that's a thread in Pixar movies as well, is that sort of, you get the mantle is passed, that sort of passing the torch on. That definitely happens here.
It's kind of like in Inside Out when Joy has a different opinion of sadness at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
You see that same kind of thing in this, where people's opinions of one another are different at the end than they were at the beginning.
Sure. And then and back to Coco, connection to your past, knowing that you're a part of something, that there's legacy, that you can begin, your own, but you build on the past. I think that's a very powerful kind of connection to that you find throughout. Definitely there, Coco, but I think in Onward too, that this young man's trying to, the 16-year-old, I think, had never met his dad. Mm-hmm. Or he was an infant. He didn't have any memories of his father.
Right. Ian has never met his father.
Right. The older guy barely had 3 or 4 memories.
Had 3 or 4 memories, and one is not a good memory. So,
right.
Yeah.
But they kind of hold that to the end too.
Yeah. You're going to get emotional talking about it. That's what's so cool. When I think about these moments with my kids in the theater, watching these movies, that's what makes it even more emotional. Watching it by myself, it's emotional. But when you bring in your life experiences and your family and your kids into these things, it's exponentially different. So I'm with you on that. Those Toy Story movies, especially as our family, those were the ones that just emotionally charged us so much.
They always do it. They did it again.
They do it again.
I'm super excited about Soul too, because I feel like it's going to be another one of those sort of really kind of deep, like Inside Out, just examining what that is. And I hope it meets the expectations, because I have a lot of high hopes for it. My expectations are very high for Soul.
Yeah,
and but I'm excited to check that out too. So 2 Pixar movies in less than 6 months. That's
pretty
awesome.
amazing.
Heck yeah.
And three brand new animated movies this year.
That's right. And Mulan on top of that in just a few weeks.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to Artemis Fowl.
Yeah.
I did see the new, I think I saw a new trailer. We read all those books in our family. So already, like, even in the opening trailers, like, well, they changed that, well, they changed that, well, they changed that. You see a lot of change, but you get the idea that it's going to be. I think it's going to be really good.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we move on, let's rate it. What's your out of 5 mouse ears?
I would give it 4.
4?
Yeah, I think it was. I really enjoyed it. Again, it's like
It's not your favorite Pixar movie.
I would say with Pixar, a lot of Pixar I would give 5.
Yeah.
A lot would get 4. only a handful, I would give a 3.
Okay. So it's
I would not give anything like a 1 or a 2. Like,
they're all good. It's just what you like the most.
Yeah.
I'm the same way. Like, I would probably, if I, about 4.2, I was going to say kind of in between, but you
always like to give it an extra point over me.
I like the points. I like 42 out of 50. It just seems like I have more flexibility there. But, no, with these movies, when you start ranking them and which is the best, they're all really good, and it's so difficult to kind of compare and contrast.
Right.
You're all holding them up against each other, but I thought it was fantastic.
You're like most of the, we talked about with the Rotten Tomatoes scores, like all the newer things always score the highest.
It's true.
What you've just seen feels more emotional sometimes.
It does. And I'm going back looking through like the catalog of Pixar movies, and man, they're all good. In different ways, and they all landed. But going back to A Bug's Life was fantastic.
Yeah, that's definitely I think such an underrated movie.
Yeah, Incredibles
compared to you hear so much about so many others, and it was just such a well done. And one of my very favorites is Ratatouille.
Oh yeah,
and talking about emotion, like to me the final speech that Ego gives at the end is just so emotional, but it's a different type of emotion. It's not letting go of a person, but he's letting go of all his preconceived ideas of the way life should be. He's letting it go, and he's come to this place where he's realizing life's not exactly like he thought it was. And so that's, to me, again, very emotional.
Absolutely. Well, I think we both liked it, and we both would recommend it. Everybody needs to go see it.
Oh, definitely would recommend it. Definitely very good.
Yeah, in a couple of weeks till Mulan comes out. Super excited about that. So we did have movie night, the family night this week. So 2 movies for Onward, but at home on Disney Plus, we actually pulled out, went to the nostalgic part and watched Swiss Family Robinson from 1960, and my kids loved it. I was kind of sometimes it's hard to keep their attention, especially my younger ones. Mm-hmm. And the older the movie gets, the harder it gets to keep their attention. And sometimes those movies weren't made to keep the attention of a 5-year-old. So especially
a 5-year-old in 2020.
Yes,
they were really targeting their market. So it's amazing to me that it held up well for your kids.
Man, they watched, they loved it. They thought that they were by the end. They're like, can we build a tree house like that? Like, they thought that was the coolest thing. And man, we had a blast watching that movie. I didn't realize how long it was, and I also realized watching it that I had never seen the whole thing. I had never made it through the movie. So it was really cool to sit through that with them and experience it. And it was a really good movie. Like, I highly recommend it. And it holds up really well today. There's obviously some cultural things that are different, but it was kind of like in a nice way, sort of nostalgic. The way the boys interacted with the female character and were jealous of each other, and just sort of some of the traditional roles you'd see in the 60s. And it was interesting to watch, kind of a throwback feeling,
Yeah, I think it's held up really well. I went when you watched it, I went back and watched it as well, and it's such a good movie. I remember when I was young. This movie was before my time, but I remember growing up and seeing it at some point, and just thinking, wow, what an adventure, and just thinking that Fritz and Ernst that they had what a cool opportunity, what an adventure. They're fighting pirates, and I thought it was as a
building
kid,
booby traps and riding animals, and it was my thing my wife said is like, man, they got every kind of animal on this island.
They talk about there was a land bridge.
It had to be a land bridge there was zebras and tigers.
It was pretty good until the zebra popped in. He was like, okay, there's no land bridge because they're supposedly leaving Switzerland to go to New Guinea, which is near Australia. Yeah. And so, but the actual movie was filmed at Tobago or Tobago. Yep. You say Tobago, I say Tobago. I'm not sure. Tobago. How do you say that?
It sounds right to me. Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah. So that's where it was actually filmed, on location there, which I think would have been pretty.
It looked really tropical.
Yeah, very, very big for Disney at that point. It's not done in a studio in a building.
Yeah.
On a closed set. They're really out there in the ocean.
I mean, monkeys, hyenas,
tigers. Yeah, there were tigers, zebras.
There's an like
elephants,
a big old snake,
elephants.
Yeah, everything.
Yeah, the big snake. I was also amazed, like having just seen. Sorry, Colorado. Yeah,
gosh,
and everyone was saying, "Oh, no animals." This was great. No animals were. And in this movie, which I think they probably took care of their animals, but we had a real zebra caught in a mud bog that they had to pull out, and
we had them riding ostriches,
and that we had. I did think it was really amazing how they filmed the tiger and the dogs fighting, because that would be almost impossible to do now. But if you really look good, you can tell that's not a real tiger when the dogs.
The dogs are twice as big as the tiger.
When the dogs have the tiger, you go, that was probably a stuffed pelt. But it was still. I was like, man, this is good old nostalgic movie making right here. And very, very Hollywood for its time. I was like the British dad, but nobody else has a British accent in the family, and they're Swiss.
Right.
But they're all very genuine, heartwarming characters that you can really relate to, and certainly the audience in the 50s and 60s really related to. And just such a really good movie.
Stands up over the test of time. I love it. Also, it's what I love about Disney Plus is you have this vault of old movies, and on movie, I had to make my kids, I had to pick it out. So the nights I get to pick it out, we, watch some, but it brings you to, there's Old Yeller in there. There's, That Darn Cat. There's all these Parent Trap, all these classic movies that, just you forget about over time and just aren't at the top of your list, and you watch them and you're like, man, these are great.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I love. I love classic Disney like that. And I saw a few years ago, there were a couple of times they talk about remaking it, and even who would be cast in it. It was like, no, that would not be the same thing. Well, please don't ruin this movie.
That's the great thing about some of this too, is you get to see kind of what culture was like in the 60s.
Right.
And again, whenever this took place in the story, that's one thing. Everybody tries to, when they do a timepiece, get the time period right. But it really says more about where they were at the time they made it,
right.
Which I find incredibly fascinating. And I think it's good for my kids, for all of us to watch. Imagine if they'd have been making films like in the 1600s, and you could go back and watch a film from the 1600s and really know
right.
not what they were making so much, but what they were thinking, how they made things would tell you a lot about them,
yes,
and their culture and their society. And you look at, move 100 years into the future, when people go back and they watch, Swiss Family Robinson from 1960, they're getting this story. It's not necessarily set in 1960. It's not necessarily, that made to film that, but you're seeing how they thought, how they made things, how they interacted, what they thought audiences wanted to see, and all that is an interesting take.
Well, think about that the story is about a family not in the 1960s, but probably 100 years before that, and so. If the movie were made now, how far the new version would be from what life was like in the 1800s? Because we would want to be showing our modern sensitivities in that setting, and so you end up with something like that doesn't even resemble the real thing anymore.
We already had Castaway with Tom Hanks. It's not like
we don't need it.
I think everything's fine it is. But you never know. Sometimes they knock them out of the park.
Yeah.
Every now and then a remake is top quality, and like Call of the Wild, for instance.
Yeah.
I thought they just nailed that. In terms of the changes were modern, the modern changes were not distasteful in the sense of messing up the story or the spirit of the story. Right. It tamed it just enough for a wide audience, a younger, not as violent or dark like we talked about. So remakes can work often, but I'm with you. After watching the 1960 Swiss Family Robinson, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's on the agenda for this week, but. We're talking about Old Yeller, but my wife is like, no, don't show him Old Yeller. Don't show him Old Yeller.
Four boys and Old Yeller. That'll be a fun movie night.
I don't know. I don't know if my youngest are quite ready. It's funny. I got one who would it would not faze him at all. Almost disturbingly not faze him, probably. And then another one that would be a puddle of tears, just a mess. So if it happens, it'll give us something to talk about here on the podcast. Here.
Oh, another story about letting go.
Letting go. Taking responsibility. The man will becoming a man, right? Well, anyhow, it's been a great week. I love the movie. Looking forward to next week. Mulan, just in a couple weeks, we'll have to grab that too. And we should probably wrap it up. And as always, we want to thank you for your time, for spending time with us here at the Why I Love Disney podcast. And if you have any questions or would like to comment or weigh in on any of the things we talked about today or anything else, for that matter, you can email us through our website at whyilovedisney.com.
Tell us what you thought about Onward.
We'd love to know. And also, you can get us through Twitter. Get a hold of us through Twitter at whyilovedisney1, the number 1. And let us know what you think. So that's it. That's all we got for this week. Until next time, so long.